My name is Fiona Bennett. I'm 25 years old, and I was tying my cafe apron when my father erased me from the family with 3 text messages. We gave your room to your cousin. Pack your stuff by Friday or it goes in the trash. You're 25. Stop being a parasite. Before I could respond, my mother added, "If you complain, don't bother coming home for the holidays. We're done with your drama." Then my younger sister joined in. "Don't call crying. You had 25 years of free rent." My father sent one final message. "Your cousin pays $900 a month. You pay nothing. Get out." What none of them mentioned was that I had spent the previous 4 years quietly paying the property taxes, repairing the plumbing, and covering part of the mortgage whenever my father's business ran short. They called those payments helping the family, so my name never appeared on a lease. Now they planned to collect rent from my cousin while throwing my belongings onto the curb. Have you ever been erased by the people who benefited most from your loyalty? I finished my shift without answering. At 2 in the morning, I drove to the house, slid a sealed envelope under the front door, and sent 5 words. Too early to celebrate. By sunrise, my father was screaming through the cafe's work phone. "Your mother is crying. What did you do? Answer your phone now." Before I reveal what was inside that envelope, and why my family suddenly needed me more than I had ever needed them, tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't answer my father. I handed the work phone back to my manager, silenced my personal cell, and began making cappuccinos as though my family hadn't spent the morning detonating my voicemail. The memories came through objects instead of orderly flashbacks. A customer ordered a cinnamon mocha, the same drink my cousin always demanded when he visited, then abandoned half-finished because someone else had paid for it. A cracked ceramic mug reminded me of the winter our kitchen pipes burst and my parents said they couldn't afford repairs. I had emptied my emergency fund to cover the plumber's invoice. A man at the counter unfolded a property tax notice, and I remembered the red envelope my father once shoved across the dining table while saying, "You're living here too. Start contributing like an adult." I had contributed. I simply hadn't been allowed to call it rent because rent created rights, records, and questions. My father preferred payments made through transfers labeled family support. My mother kept a spreadsheet of every dollar they claimed to have spent raising me, but somehow never recorded the $17,000 I had transferred back to them after turning 21. My sister received a car for graduating community college. My cousin received introductions, loans, and a position at my father's contracting company, despite having no qualifications. I received lectures about gratitude. The golden child wasn't successful. He was subsidized. Whenever he lost money, my parents called it ambition. Whenever I saved money, they called it selfishness. The envelope I left under their door contained copies of bank transfers, tax payments, repair receipts, and a formal notice drafted by a tenant rights attorney. I had lived in that house continuously, paid recurring household expenses, received mail there, and contributed to property costs. Whether my parents liked it or not, they could not legally order me out by text and throw away my belongings. More importantly, the envelope contained something they didn't know I possessed: a copy of a signed repayment agreement from 3 years earlier. My father had borrowed $32,000 from me after claiming his company would collapse without it. He promised to repay me when a commercial renovation project closed. The project had closed 18 months ago. He never paid. Instead, he bought my cousin a truck and told everyone business was booming. At noon, my mother called the cafe 11 times. My father called 7. My sister sent, "Whatever stunt you pulled, fix it." My cousin wrote, "Don't make this weird. I already bought furniture for your room." I finally replied to him, "Keep the receipts." His answer arrived immediately. "Why?" I stared at the screen and wondered what you would do if the person taking your room had no idea the entire house was standing on money stolen from you. I didn't explain. I had spent years explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. That afternoon, Megan Torres walked into the cafe. We had been friends in high school, though adulthood had reduced our friendship to occasional messages and birthday reactions. She ordered tea, watched me reject another call, and asked, "Is your family panicking because of the lien?" My hands stopped moving. I had never told her about the loan. She glanced toward the door and lowered her voice. "Your cousin has been telling people your father transferred part of the company to him. He also said they're refinancing the house to fund a new project." Suddenly, their rush to charge him rent made sense. $900 wasn't the goal. Creating a paper trail showing rental income was. They needed the house to look more profitable before refinancing it. Megan had not come to comfort me. She worked as an administrative coordinator for the lender processing my parents' application. She had recognized the address and my cousin's name. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered, "but your name appears in the supporting documents." They had listed my monthly payments as voluntary gifts from a dependent daughter, then claimed my cousin would replace me as a paying tenant. My family wasn't merely kicking me out. They were rewriting years of financial history to secure a loan. Megan's accidental revelation did not push me into the fire. It showed me who had already poured the gasoline. Megan could not give me confidential documents, and I refused to ask her to risk her job. Instead, she told me exactly what I needed to request from my father in writing: a full accounting of my loan, confirmation of the repayment date, and copies of any financial statements using my contributions. I sent the request by email, copied my attorney, and gave my father 48 hours to respond. 10 minutes later, he called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I wanted to hear how he sounded when intimidation stopped working. "You embarrassed your mother," he said. No greeting, no question about where I would live. "You left legal threats under our door like a criminal," I said. "I left documentation." He lowered his voice. "You gave us that money." "Then why did you sign a repayment agreement?" Silence. I could hear my mother crying in the background, but her crying had always appeared at convenient moments, usually when someone challenged my father. He changed tactics. "We were going to repay you after the refinancing." That was the first admission. I asked, "Why is my name in the application?" Another silence. Then he said, "You don't understand business." That sentence had been used against me since I was a teenager. I didn't understand business when I warned him not to guarantee my cousin's truck loan. I didn't understand business when I questioned why his company paid personal credit cards. I didn't understand business when I asked why he needed cash, despite claiming record profits. Yet somehow, the daughter who understood nothing had been expected to rescue him repeatedly. "Send the documents," I said, "or my attorney will request them." He shouted that attorneys destroyed families. I replied, "No, fraud does." Then I ended the call. That evening, Megan asked me to meet at a 24-hour diner. She arrived pale and nervous. My cousin had contacted her on social media and asked whether the lender had flagged anything weird. He also bragged that once the refinance closed, he would become operations director at my father's company. Megan showed me the message without revealing anything confidential. It was enough to establish that he knew about the application. Then she told me something worse. Months earlier, he had applied for a junior design position at the same firm where I had once dreamed of working. He had been rejected after presenting portfolio work that did not belong to him. One of the projects looked almost identical to a community redesign proposal I had created during an online certification course. I opened my cloud storage and found the original files, timestamps, drafts, and instructor feedback. My cousin had stolen my work from the family computer. My parents had always mocked my design classes as expensive hobbies, yet they had allowed their favorite boy to use my work to chase a professional title. I could have exposed him immediately, But anger without timing is just noise. I needed stability before confrontation. Over the next week, I worked morning shifts, slept 4 hours a night, updated my portfolio, and contacted every professional connection I had avoided because my family taught me to expect rejection. The design firm had an opening for a project coordinator with visual planning experience. I submitted my work with complete process files proving authorship. 2 days later, they invited me to interview. The night before the meeting, my mother sent a photograph of trash bags stacked beside the garage. "Friday is tomorrow," she wrote. "Your father means it." Beneath the message, my sister added a laughing emoji. For 10 minutes, I sat on my apartment floor staring at the photo. I had rented the tiny studio months earlier because late cafe shifts made commuting difficult. But most of my important belongings remained at the family house: childhood journals, my grandmother's sewing box, school records, original sketches. Everything they knew mattered to me. Part of me wanted to abandon the interview, drive over, and rescue every object. That was the pattern they expected. Create chaos, force Fiona to respond, then accuse her of being dramatic. I almost obeyed. Then I remembered the repayment agreement, the forged financial story, and my stolen portfolio. I called a licensed moving company, arranged a police civil standby, and scheduled the pickup for 6 the next morning. My father opened the door in his bathrobe and demanded that the officers leave his property. They explained that I had established residency and was entitled to retrieve my belongings. My cousin stood behind him recording me, grinning as though my humiliation would become entertainment. I looked directly at his phone and said, "Make sure you save that video. You may need it later." His grin disappeared. By 8, my belongings were secured in storage. By 10, I was sitting across from 3 interviewers at the design firm. One of them placed my community redesign proposal on the table and said, "We've seen an earlier version of this concept before." My stomach tightened. Then she continued, "From another applicant. We rejected him because he couldn't explain the process. You can." She asked whether I knew him. I could have protected him. My family had trained me to hide their mistakes before outsiders noticed. Instead, I answered, "Yes. He is my cousin, and he accessed these files without permission." I provided timestamps and drafts. The interviewer closed the folder and said, "Thank you for being direct." When I left, I had no idea whether honesty had cost me the job. But for the first time, I preferred an uncertain future built on truth to a secure place inside my family's lie. The design firm called 3 days later. They didn't offer me the coordinator role. They offered me something better: a paid 6-month project fellowship leading into a permanent design operations position, with a salary nearly twice what I earned at the cafe. The hiring director said my portfolio was strong, but my documentation, crisis management, and ability to explain complex decisions had set me apart. Everything my family called weakness, my caution, my record keeping, my refusal to exaggerate, had become evidence of professional value. I accepted, but the victory lasted less than an hour. My sister posted online that I had threatened our parents over free housing and was trying to destroy my father's company because I was jealous of our cousin. She didn't use my name, but relatives knew exactly who she meant. My aunt commented that some children never appreciate sacrifice. My cousin wrote, "Imagine being 25 and suing your parents because they finally ask you to grow up." Then my mother shared his post. That betrayal hurt more than the eviction text. They weren't merely choosing him privately. They were manufacturing a public story in which I was an entitled daughter extorting hardworking parents. I wanted to answer every comment, upload every receipt, and burn their reputation to the ground. Would you expose your family immediately if you had proof? Or would you wait until they could no longer escape it? My attorney advised silence until my father responded to the debt demand. Public arguments could complicate the financial claim, so I posted one sentence: "Financial records will speak at the appropriate time." My cousin deleted his comment within 20 minutes. The next morning, my new employer received an anonymous email claiming I had fabricated portfolio materials and had an unstable history of workplace conflict. The sender attached screenshots of my sister's post. The hiring director called me before making assumptions. I showed her the original files, the family messages, and the legal correspondence. She believed me, but the sabotage changed something inside me. Until then, I had considered the eviction cruel but impulsive. Now I understood that my family would damage my career to preserve their version of me. I sent a cease and desist letter covering defamation, portfolio theft, destruction of property, and interference with employment. My father responded by ordering me to attend a family dinner. "No lawyers," he wrote. "No recordings. We settle this as blood." I declined. 20 minutes later, he offered $5,000 if I signed a statement confirming the $32,000 had been a gift. Then he offered 10. By evening, he offered 15 and said I was forcing him to choose between repaying me and keeping employees on payroll. That was another manipulation. Public business records showed his company had recently purchased 2 vehicles. One was registered to my cousin. I replied, "The full amount, interest, and documented expenses are due. Communicate through counsel." My mother left a voicemail saying, "Your father could lose everything." I listened twice, not because I felt guilty, but because she never once said I could have lost everything when they gave me 4 days to leave. The refinancing application stalled once my attorney formally disputed their description of my payments and notified the lender of the outstanding loan. My father could not easily borrow against a house entangled in an unresolved financial claim. He blamed me, but the truth was simpler. He had tried to use my money twice, first as an unpaid loan, then as evidence of family generosity. My cousin became furious because the stalled refinance delayed his promotion and access to project funds. He sent me a voice message calling me bitter, talentless, and replaceable. At the end, he said, "That house will be mine eventually. You were never part of the plan." I saved the recording. 2 days later, my employer's legal department confirmed that he had submitted portions of my copyrighted work during his failed application. They issued their own demand that he stop using it professionally. He called my father called my mother, and my mother called me crying. This time I answered. "Please," she whispered, "come to dinner. Your cousin made mistakes, but he's family." I asked, "Was I family when you threatened to throw my belongings in the trash?" She said nothing. I agreed to attend, not to reconcile, but because my attorney had received the lender's response that afternoon. The application contained a document bearing my electronic signature. I had never signed it. Someone in that house had committed forgery. The dining room looked almost exactly as it had during every childhood celebration. Polished table, matching plates, my mother's best serving dishes, and my father seated at the head as though authority were part of the furniture. My aunt, uncle, sister, cousin, and 2 family friends were present. That was deliberate. My parents wanted witnesses for my surrender. My cousin sat in my old chair. Beside his plate was a new key fob for the truck purchased by my father's company. My mother greeted me with a tight smile and said, "Let's keep this respectful." On the sideboard, her phone was already recording. They had forbidden me to record while preparing their own evidence. I took the empty seat nearest the door. My father began with a speech about family sacrifice. He said they had supported me for 25 years, allowed me to experiment with low-paying jobs, and finally made the practical decision to rent my unused room to someone contributing $900 a month. He never mentioned my tax payments, the plumbing repair, the mortgage transfers, or the $32,000 loan. Then he announced that my cousin had been promoted to operations manager at the company. Everyone clapped except me. My cousin raised his glass and said, "Some of us build opportunities instead of demanding them." I asked my father whether the promotion happened before or after the refinancing application. His face tightened. "We're not discussing business details." I placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of my transfers, the signed loan agreement, the lender's disputed financial statement, and the page carrying the forged electronic signature. My mother stopped smiling. My cousin stared at the signature page longer than anyone else. I asked, "Who signed my name?" My father said the document was only preliminary. I repeated the question. My sister muttered, "You're ruining dinner." I looked at her and said, "Someone used my identity to obtain a loan. Dinner is not the emergency." My cousin leaned back and laughed. "You're acting like the FBI is coming." I asked why he had deleted files from the family computer the morning after receiving my cease and desist letter. He went still. I had not known he deleted anything. I was testing his reaction based on a notification from my old Cloud Sync account. His face gave me the answer. My father slammed his hand on the table and said, "Enough. You're jealous because he's doing something with his life." I told everyone about the stolen design portfolio. My cousin called me a liar. I showed the copyright notice from my employer. My aunt stopped eating. My uncle asked whether the company knew. My father refused to look at the documents. Instead, he opened his banking app and transferred $900 to my cousin in front of me. "There," he said. "First month's rent returned because your drama delayed the move. We take care of people who respect us." Even after learning his favorite nephew had stolen my work and possibly forged my signature, my father rewarded him. That moment freed me from the last fantasy that evidence could make my parents fair. They did not misunderstand the truth. They rejected any truth that threatened their hierarchy. My mother finally spoke. "Your cousin signed the form, but your father approved it. They thought you would consent." The room erupted. My cousin shouted that she was confused. My father told her to stop talking. My sister began crying because the refinance was supposed to pay off her credit card debt too. There it was. The entire family had divided money they did not yet have, using my identity to unlock it. I asked how much they planned to borrow. $240,000. My father said it would expand the company, consolidate debts, renovate the house, and secure everyone's future. Everyone except me. I explained that the lender had frozen the application and referred the signature issue to its fraud department. My cousin stood so quickly that his chair fell backward. "You reported us?" he shouted. "I disputed a document I didn't sign." He pointed at me and told my father to make me withdraw the complaint. My father ordered me to sign a new statement before leaving. When I refused, he said, "Then you are no longer our daughter. Don't come back for holidays, funerals, anything." My mother covered her mouth but did not challenge him. My sister whispered, "Just sign it. Why do you always have to make everything hard?" I stood, gathered my folder, and looked around the table. "Because you built your easy life on my silence." As I reached the door, my cousin shouted that I would regret humiliating him. I turned and said, "You should worry less about humiliation and more about the company account ending in 4412. His face drained of color. Megan had never given me confidential lender documents, but my own bank records showed repeated repayments from an account with those final digits. My father looked at him. "What account?" My cousin said it was nothing. I left before he could invent an answer. 10 minutes later, my father called 17 times. By midnight, my mother sent one message. What did he do? The company account ending in 4412 had transferred money to me whenever my father made partial loan payments during the first year. After those payments stopped, I assumed the account had closed. While organizing records for my attorney, I noticed that the same account number appeared on a recent reimbursement my cousin accidentally sent me after using my cafe loyalty profile for a catering order. He canceled the payment quickly, but the transaction remained visible. That meant he had access to an old company account my father believed inactive. My attorney advised me not to investigate beyond my own records, so I gave the information to my father after the dinner. He didn't thank me. He accused me of planting evidence. 24 hours later, his accountant discovered that the account had remained active for nearly 2 years. My cousin had redirected customer deposits, issued fake vendor payments, and used company funds for truck installments, luxury travel, online gambling, and the repayment of personal loans. The amount exceeded $180,000. He had promoted himself with stolen money before receiving the official title. Worse, several fake vendors were connected to a shell company registered in his friend's name. My father's business had been profitable enough to survive, but not after taxes, penalties, unpaid suppliers, and the missing funds were counted. The refinance had not been intended primarily for expansion. It was supposed to fill the hole before the accountant found it. My father had known the books were inconsistent, but he believed his nephew's explanation that customers were paying late. He chose to mortgage the house rather than question his favorite. Once the lender froze the application, the hole could no longer be hidden. Suppliers stopped extending credit. 2 commercial clients suspended projects. Employees' payroll cleared late. My sister's promised debt payoff disappeared. My mother's planned kitchen renovation vanished, and the cousin who had taken my room stopped paying the $900 after a single month. He claimed the company owed him more than he owed the family. When my father confronted him, he packed the furniture he had bought, took the truck, and left. The truck was later recovered at an airport parking garage. My cousin had flown to another state, but the account records followed him. The company filed a police report. My employer cooperated separately regarding the stolen portfolio and false application materials. The lender referred the forged signature for investigation. I did not orchestrate his collapse. I simply stopped shielding him from consequences. That distinction mattered because my family immediately tried to shift the burden onto me. My mother called and said, "You knew something was wrong. Why didn't you warn us earlier?" I reminded her that I had questioned the company transfers months before, and my father told me I didn't understand business. My sister said I should temporarily withdraw the debt claim so our parents could refinance and save the company. I asked whether she would contribute her savings. She said she had none. My aunt suggested I return home, help organize the accounts, and forgive the loan until the crisis passes. Every solution required me to sacrifice again. No one suggested selling my cousin's truck, canceling my sister's expensive apartment, liquidating my father's recreational boat, or asking relatives who had applauded at dinner to contribute. They saw my independence as an emergency fund. My father finally arrived at my workplace without warning. He stood near the counter, red-eyed and unshaven, demanding that I speak to him. My manager asked him to leave, but I agreed to meet outside during my break. He said my mother had not slept in days. The house could be lost. The company might close. 23 employees depended on him. Then he said, "You've made your point." I asked what point he thought I was making. "That we underestimated you," he replied. Even then, he framed accountability as my performance. I told him I would not withdraw the fraud dispute or pretend the loan was a gift. However, I offered one structured option. I would pause collection for 90 days if he signed a secured repayment plan, hired an independent forensic accountant, removed every family member from financial control, sold unnecessary company assets, and stopped making public claims about me. The arrangement would protect legitimate employees without rescuing the people who caused the damage. He called the terms humiliating. I said, "No. Being threatened with homelessness by people using your money is humiliating." He asked whether I enjoyed watching him suffer. That question stayed with me. A darker part of me had imagined revenge many times. The house sold, the company sign removed, my cousin arrested, my parents finally begging. But seeing my father broken did not feel like victory. It felt like confirmation that worshiping the wrong person had cost him everything. I don't enjoy this, I said, but I'm no longer willing to suffer so you don't have to. He signed the agreement 2 days later. The forensic accountant found additional irregularities, including payments my sister had received for administrative work she never performed. She was required to repay part of the money. My mother sold jewelry to cover household expenses. My father sold the boat and one company vehicle. The house was not immediately lost, but a portion of it was pledged as security for my repayment. The room they had taken from me to earn $900 a month now sat empty. No one wanted to rent a room in a house filled with investigations, arguments, and overdue notices. My cousin eventually returned through an attorney and denied intentional theft, claiming he believed he had authority to use the funds. The evidence disagreed. He lost the truck, the promised position, his professional reputation, and the protection he had mistaken for permanent immunity. My family had celebrated too early. So had he. 6 months after the eviction message, I became a permanent design operations specialist. My fellowship project helped convert an abandoned municipal building into affordable studio spaces for local artists and small businesses. During the final presentation, the hiring director displayed the original sketches my cousin had stolen and credited me publicly as the designer who developed them. For years, my work had been used to make other people look capable. That day, my name appeared beneath it. I no longer worked full-time at the cafe, but I kept one weekend shift each month because it reminded me where my life changed. Not when my family apologized, not when my cousin was exposed. My life changed the morning I finished my shift instead of running home to beg for a room that should never have been used as a weapon. The legal and financial consequences continued. My father's company survived, but only after shrinking, selling assets, and accepting oversight from an outside financial manager. Several employees stayed. Others found new jobs. My father had to step down from daily financial control. My cousin entered a repayment arrangement connected to the misused funds, while the signature and business matters proceeded through their respective legal channels. My sister moved into a smaller apartment and took a second job after the company demanded repayment for undocumented wages. She blamed me for months before finally admitting, in a brief message, that she had repeated whatever our parents said because she feared becoming the next target. I understood her fear, but understanding did not erase her choices. I accepted her apology without restoring automatic access to my life. My mother asked to meet at the cafe. She arrived carrying my grandmother's sewing box, the one item that had disappeared during the supervised move. She admitted hiding it because she wanted a reason for me to return. "I thought once you calmed down, we could fix this," she said. I asked what fixing meant to her. She began describing holidays, dinners, and eventually forgetting the entire incident. That was not repair. That was a return to silence. I told her forgiveness was not the same as pretending nothing happened. She cried and said she had lost her nephew, nearly lost the house, and watched her marriage become consumed by blame. Then she said, "We've been punished enough." I looked at the sewing box between us. Consequences are not punishments I assigned. They are the cost of decisions you made. She asked whether I still loved her. I did. Love was never the question. The question was whether love required me to volunteer for mistreatment. I told her we could speak once a month, meet in public places, and rebuild trust slowly. She would not receive access to my finances, employer, apartment, or legal decisions. My father would need to apologize without asking me to reduce the debt. My sister would need to stop discussing me online. Any violation would pause contact. My mother said boundaries sounded cold. I answered, they only feel cold to people who were kept warm by crossing them. My father's apology arrived 3 weeks later in a handwritten letter. He admitted that he had used my reliability as proof that I needed less care. He said supporting my cousin made him feel powerful because my cousin praised him, while I asked questions that made him feel inadequate. He acknowledged that he had called me a parasite while owing me money. It was the first apology he gave without adding, but. I did not rush home. I wrote back that I appreciated the honesty and would consider meeting after the first 6 repayment installments cleared. Accountability needed a calendar, not just emotion. The installments arrived on time. When we eventually met, my father looked older. He did not ask me to save the business or forgive my cousin. He simply asked about my work. I showed him a photograph of the completed community studio. He said, "You built something good out of all this." I corrected him. "I built something good despite it." We did not hug dramatically. We drank coffee for 40 minutes and left separately. That was enough. People sometimes ask whether I regret reporting the forged signature or enforcing the loan. They ask whether blood should matter more than money. But this was never only about money. Money was the language my family used to measure worth. $900 made my cousin valuable. Years of unpaid support made me invisible. The moment I demanded records, boundaries, and repayment, they called me cruel, because fairness threatened a system designed around my obedience. Would you forgive people who only recognized your value after losing access to it? My answer is that forgiveness does not require restoration. I release the need to watch them suffer, but I did not release them from responsibility. My cousin lost the life he built on stolen work and stolen money. My parents lost control over a daughter they assumed would always return. My sister lost the comfort of standing with the crowd and pretending she had no choice. And I lost the belief that being needed was the same as being loved. That loss became my freedom. I now live in a bright, one-bedroom apartment with no family keys in circulation. My grandmother's sewing box sits beside my drafting table. The $32,000 loan is being repaid under a secured schedule. I no longer check my phone with fear when a family message appears. Sometimes it is my mother asking whether I am available for coffee. Sometimes it is my father sending a payment confirmation. Sometimes it is silence, and silence no longer feels like rejection. It feels like space. The last time I drove past their house, the curtains in my old room were open. The room was empty except for a folding table and several boxes of company records. My cousin had lasted 37 days there. My parents nearly lost their home chasing $900 a month from a man who took $180,000 from their business. They believed removing me would solve their problems. Instead, it removed the person who had been quietly preventing those problems from reaching them. I did not destroy my family. I stopped being the wall standing between them and the consequences they created. The night they kicked me out, they thought they were trading a parasite for a profitable tenant. They celebrated before checking who had paid the taxes, repaired the house, funded the company, documented the debt, and preserved the evidence. That was why my message contained only 5 words. They weren't a threat. They were a warning my family was too arrogant to understand. Too early to celebrate.
Thank you for joining us until the final moment of the story. Everything in this video is completely fictional and made only for entertainment and educational purposes. We hope it reminds you that the people who hurt you may never give you the closure you wanted, but you can still create your own closure by choosing peace, distance, and a life that no longer revolves around their choices.